Have you ever wondered why the very thing that feels like protection becomes the prison that keeps happiness at bay? This peculiar phenomenon where avoidant regret became the truth shapes more lives than most people realize. When someone consistently chooses distance over connection, safety over vulnerability, what starts as a protective mechanism slowly transforms into an unshakable belief system about how relationships work. The human mind possesses a remarkable ability to rewrite history. What begins as a series of calculated decisions to avoid emotional pain eventually becomes gospel truth about love, trust, and human nature itself. Like a master architect designing a fortress, the avoidant mind builds walls so sophisticated that even the builder forgets they were constructed by choice rather than necessity. This transformation from protective strategy to core belief system affects millions of people who find themselves perpetually on the outside of meaningful connections, wondering why intimacy feels so foreign. Understanding this process matters because it reveals something profound about human psychology and the stories people tell themselves to make sense of their choices. When avoidance becomes identity, when fear becomes wisdom, when isolation becomes preference, the original wound disappears beneath layers of rationalization so thick that finding the truth requires archaeological precision. But here lies the hope. What was learned can be unlearned, what was built can be rebuilt, and what became truth can be questioned. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. But before diving into solutions, consider the story of Marcus, a brilliant software engineer who prided himself on independence. At 32, Marcus had convinced himself that romantic relationships were inefficient, messy complications that distracted from more important pursuits. He would often joke with colleagues about being allergically single, treating his relationship status as a badge of honor rather than a limitation. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Years earlier, Marcus had experienced a devastating breakup with someone he thought he would marry. The pain felt unbearable, like having his chest cavity hollowed out with a rusty spoon while remaining fully conscious. Instead of processing the grief, Marcus made a decision that seemed perfectly logical at the time. Never again would he allow himself to become that vulnerable. What started as a temporary emotional break became a permanent lifestyle. Marcus began collecting evidence that supported his new worldview. Every divorced friend became proof that marriage was doomed. Every couple's argument he witnessed confirmed that relationships caused unnecessary drama. Every romantic comedy he saw reinforced his belief that love was a fairy tale designed to sell movie tickets and greeting cards. Like Joe Goldberg from the Netflix series You, Marcus became obsessed with his own narrative, except instead of pursuing love to dangerous extremes, he was running from it with equal intensity. Years passed, and Marcus genuinely believed he had evolved beyond the need for romantic connection. He felt superior to his coupled friends, pitying their compromises and complications. But late at night, in the quiet moments between sleep and consciousness, a small voice whispered questions he couldn't quite silence. The regret he thought he had avoided had simply shape-shifted into something more insidious. The regret of never trying again. The turning point came during his sister's wedding, watching her dance with her new husband. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the weight of his own construction project, all those walls he had built so carefully. But would admitting this mean everything he had believed about himself was wrong? This story illustrates how confirmation bias works in the realm of attachment avoidance. Confirmation bias, the tendency to search for and interpret information in ways that confirm pre-existing beliefs, becomes particularly powerful when protecting emotional wounds. Marcus wasn't just avoiding relationships, he was actively seeking evidence that relationships were bad while ignoring any information that contradicted this belief. Now, if this pattern feels familiar, the path forward requires both courage and strategy. The first step involves recognizing that avoidance felt necessary for valid reasons. Nobody chooses emotional distance because life has been too easy. Something happened that made vulnerability feel dangerous, and the protective response made perfect sense at the time. Acknowledging this isn't weakness, it's the foundation for change. The second step requires examining the evidence with fresh eyes. Just as Marcus collected proof that relationships were problematic, it becomes essential to actively seek counter-evidence. This means paying attention to healthy couples, noticing successful relationships, and questioning whether the patterns observed truly represent all possibilities or just selected data points that confirm existing fears. Third, start small with emotional risks. Like Blair Waldorf from Gossip Girl, learning to trust Serena van der Woodsen again after betrayal. Rebuilding the capacity for vulnerability happens incrementally. This might mean sharing something slightly personal with a friend, expressing a genuine opinion in a group setting, or admitting when something actually matters instead of pretending indifference. The fourth step involves challenging the internal narrative directly. When thoughts arise like, relationships always end badly, or independence is always better, pause and ask where this certainty comes from. Replace absolute statements with more accurate ones. Some relationships end badly, but others thrive, or independence has benefits, but so does connection. This isn't about becoming naive, it's about developing a more nuanced perspective. Fifth, practice tolerating uncertainty. Avoidant patterns often develop because uncertainty feels intolerable, but healthy relationships require comfort with not knowing exactly what will happen. Like Emily Cooper from Emily in Paris, learning to navigate unexpected cultural differences, building tolerance for unpredictability becomes essential for emotional growth. The sixth crucial element involves distinguishing between self-protection and self-imprisonment. Healthy boundaries protect while allowing connection. Avoidant barriers prevent both harm and joy. Learning this difference requires honest evaluation of whether current patterns serve growth or simply maintain familiar discomfort. Finally, consider that healing often requires support. Just as Love Quinn from You needed professional help to address her attachment patterns, though through extreme circumstances, working with a therapist who understands attachment theory can provide guidance and accountability that makes change possible rather than just theoretically appealing. Remember that this process isn't about becoming someone different, it's about becoming more fully who you already are beneath the protective strategies. The capacity for connection doesn't disappear, it just gets buried under years of careful avoidance. The journey from avoidant regret to authentic truth requires patience and self-compassion. Marcus eventually realized that his sophisticated theories about relationship dysfunction were simply elaborate ways of saying, "I'm scared of being hurt again." Once he could admit this simple truth, the path forward became clearer, even if still challenging. Your own patterns of avoidance developed for good reasons, but those reasons may no longer serve your current reality. The walls that once protected might now be preventing the very experiences that could bring meaning and joy to your life. This isn't about abandoning wisdom gained through difficult experiences. It's about updating that wisdom to include new possibilities. Take one small step today toward questioning whether your avoidant patterns still serve you. Notice one piece of counter-evidence to your beliefs about relationships or vulnerability. Practice tolerating just a little more uncertainty than feels comfortable. The truth you've been avoiding might not be as dangerous as the regret you've been carrying. Sometimes the greatest risk isn't in opening your heart again, it's in keeping it closed forever.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.